Alright, let's make some cheddar cheese soup. This is one of my favorite soups, and especially when the weather's a little bit chilly outside. I'm not a real big fan of the super heavy, gloopy, almost like mac and cheese style punch you in the stomach version of the soup, but rather I'm a fan of the lighter versions. So today I want to show you a version that showcases the sharpness of the cheese. So with that being said, let's just jump into making it. Alright, so the first part of this is to do some veggie prep. We're going to need about 4 spring onions. We're going to chop off the little rooty bits and also the tops where they start to get a little bit thin. And we can save these parts for garnish later if we want to. If the outside layer is a little grody, I like to pull this off, just leaving the fresh inside of the spring onion. Now just chop these spring onions up, just going along the stem. After we're done with that, we should have a nice pile of spring onion rings. And we can now move on to our next vegetable, which is carrots. And for this recipe, I'm using 2 carrots. Just go ahead and peel them and chop off the ends. Now to prepare the carrots for the soup, instead of chopping them, we're gonna actually grate them. This will give us nice and wispy carrot pieces in the soup instead of hunking chunks, which won't really work in this recipe. I'm using the thin slicer on the grater, but if you don't have a grater available, you can always just use your carrot peeler and just create small pieces of carrot that way. Alternatively, if you really don't like carrots, you can just skip the whole carrot business altogether. Alright, now it's time to move on to the star of our show, which is our cheese. Now I like to use an extra sharp Vermont cheddar cheese, but if you aren't such a fan of the sharp stuff, feel free to use a milder cheese here. We want to grate about 4 ounces or 100 grams of cheddar, which will give us about 1 cup of shredded cheese. Now the size that you grate it isn't too critical since it's gonna melt into the soup anyways, but I usually prefer to go for the bigger holes on the box grater just because it grates a little bit quicker. Once our cheese is all grated, just go ahead and set this into the fridge and we'll come back to that when we get to that point in the soup making process. Alright, the last thing that we're gonna need is about 1 quart or about 1 liter of chicken stock. And just make sure you have that ready because we're gonna need to add hand. Alright, so now that we're done with the prep, we can finally move on to actually making the soup. Well, barring that your cat doesn't try to stop you looking for pets. To begin cooking, place the pot over medium heat, and while this is heating up, toss in 3 tablespoons of butter. We're just going to stir this to ensure that it properly melts and doesn't burn. Once the butter is completely melted, add in our spring onions, and we're just going to let them cook for a little bit, knocking down that raw punchiness of the spring onion flavor. We want to cook these for about 2 minutes or until they soften and look like this. Once they're softened, turn the heat down just a smidge and add in 1/4 cup or about 35 grams of all-purpose flour. Quickly begin stirring the flour to ensure that we've spread it out, and you'll notice the flour kind of clings to the spring onions, and that's completely okay. We're going to keep stirring and cooking this flour for about 2 minutes. And be sure to scrape up any of the brown bits that kind of form on the bottom. The goal here is we want to, as Chef John always says, take the raw edge off this flour. If we undercook this, it will make our soup taste kind of pasty, so as long as you keep stirring, it's better to err on the side of cooking it for too long than undercooking it. Now, as long as your heat isn't too high, it should only take about 2 minutes to get to this stage. So you should notice that your flour starts to darken up ever so slightly, and it should kind of look like this. When we get to this point, go ahead and add in about 1 cup of the chicken stock and begin stirring it into the cooked flour. Now, when you mix it up at first, it will look a little bit watery, but after about 10 seconds, it will thicken up and come together. And once it begins to bubble like this, we can go ahead and add in more of our stock. So typically I add probably about another cup or so, let it thicken a little bit, and we're gonna keep doing this until we've mixed all of the stock in. Now, along the way, you want to keep an eye on how thick it is. And if it starts to get a little too thin for your taste, this is a thinner soup and that's how I prefer it. But if it's getting a little too thin for your taste, feel free to stop there and don't add any more stock in. All right, so now that I've added in my stock, the rest of the recipe is relatively simple. We can go ahead and just add in our shredded carrots, giving them a good stir, and we're just gonna let this cook for a minute, and this is just gonna allow us to really make sure that the roux has kind of reached its final thickness. After that minute, we can go ahead and add in our shredded cheese, and keep stirring until it becomes one with the soup. Now at this point, it's just kind of really a matter of final flavor crafting, so go ahead and add in some white pepper, or black pepper if you don't have any white pepper. And we also want to add in a few drops of Worcestershire sauce. And you can additionally, if you want to, add a few dashes of Tobasco if you kind of want to give it a little bit of a kick. So then really the last thing we need to do is taste for salt. So we didn't add any really at any stage in this recipe, but the cheese should have some salt in it. And that will really be highly dependent on which cheese you get. So you're gonna have to go by taste here. You know, give it a good taste. If it doesn't taste salty enough, just add a little bit more and just keep adjusting this until you feel like it's ready. After that, we're done. Go ahead and scoop yourself a bowl of piping hot deliciousness. And this soup is really, it comes together so quickly and it really doesn't require that many ingredients. I hope you enjoyed this recipe and let me know if you have any problems in trying to make this in the comments down below. If you wanna help me out, please consider sharing some of my videos. It really, really helps the channel when you guys share. All right, well, I hope to see you guys all soon, and thank you for watching this short recipe. Bye.